there, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Laura Wansick and I love to talk about all kinds of crafts. I recently went on a girls' weekend in Columbus, Ohio with a couple of my friends, and they humored me by going to a fabric shop that I had heard great things about called So to Speak. While we were there, even though neither of them sew, they both found fabric that they really liked, and so I told them if they bought all the supplies, I would make the projects for them. My friend Annie found this really cute pillow that I told her I could probably adapt into a bag. And my friend Anna found this really cute project bag kit that I told her if she got the fabric and hardware for that I would make it for her. So I'm going to show you all the supplies that they bought and we're going to see if I can figure these out. So my friend Anna picked out this wide open tube frame pouch kit that has the hardware and hopefully the instructions on the inside. And then she picked out this Liberty of London fabric to be the outside, and this fun yellow fabric to be the inside. And then she also got a couple of these solids that I thought maybe I could do a patchwork with somehow. I'm gonna see what works once I get started. And then some fusible fleece. And then my friend Annie picked out this Fabulism plaid fabric. And she picked out this Rifle Paper Company fabric to be the liner. It's really pretty because it's foiled. And then we've got this like natural color to kind of be the ruffle on the outside of the plaid. And then this pretty purple strap for the tote. So let's get started.
All right, so first up is Anna's project, and thankfully the instructions and a template for cutting were all included here with the hardware. So this is a great kit. I would highly recommend this. You'll see later that I get frustrated with the hardware part, but part of that is because I didn't actually read the instructions, which is classic me to not read the instructions. So that part frustrated me, but everything else was super easy. So I'm just starting here by getting all my fabrics nice and crisp by ironing them and then using this little template to cut out all the pieces. So you cut out 2 of your main fabric, 2 of your liner fabric, and then 2 of the fusible interfacing. I took a lint roller to my interfacing because there was a bunch of stuff all over it, and while it probably didn't matter, I just kind of wanted to clean it off. I do have cats that are in our lower level, which is where my craft room is, so I have to be kind of careful because sometimes they like to jump into my fabric baskets and it's very annoying. So I actually have started storing all of my interfacing and soft and stable and batting in a closed shelf that I have so that they can't go lay on it. Here I am cutting out the casings. So this is an important part of the project to keep exact because you're going to be putting the metal hardware through the casing or tubing that is going to create. So here you can see I've got all the pieces cut out and they're ready to assemble. I've also got these little notions that my friend picked out. Well, the scissors she picked out. I picked out the other parts that she wanted to be included. So the first step is to make these casings. And like I said, make sure that it's pretty exact because if it's accidentally too small, then the hardware won't go through it at the end. And that's already kind of a frustrating process. So try to make it as easy for yourself as possible. So one of the benefits to having fusible interfacing here as opposed to sew-in is that there's no quilting. So if you were quilting that fabric onto the interfacing, then you could just count on it being secure through the quilting. But here the heat activates the glue dots on the fusible interfacing so that it's nice and secure when you get ready to go make the actual project. Now I'm using the template there to mark the center and the edges, and that's important because then you're going to make sure that the casings that you're about to sew on are exactly where they need to go. Again, you want to do this as precise as possible so that that hardware is exactly where you want it to be in the end. So I marked the center of the casing as well so that I could line it up with the center of the outside fabric there. And I'm going ahead and including the scissor notion here because it's just so cute with that purple. It matches it so perfectly, and I wanted it to come out of the lining there. And then the other little tag I decided to center on the front of it and just sew around the entire square so it was nice and secure. Okay, now the front and back of the bag are clipped together, right sides together. And you can see I'm going to sew along there and just along that on both sides because we're going to prepare it for boxing the corners. It's good to backstitch on both of those lines so that the edge here is nice and secure. I'm so sorry that this is kind of close to being off camera. You can see that seam there. I always put one of the seam sides to the left and one of the seam sides to the right just to reduce the bulk. And I am not a user of pins. I rarely use pins. I always prefer clips because they don't poke me. So now I'm sewing this part to box the corners and moving on to the lining. So this, we're going to repeat the whole thing here, except at the bottom you don't sew the whole thing because you've got to be able to turn it inside out. Okay, now it's time to push the corners out. So I use this little pushing tool just to help me kind of get the corners nice and pushed all the way out. And now we're going to put the main pieces together. So my lining is the same on both sides, so I didn't have to make sure that I had the right side going with the right side, but you'll want the wrong side of the lining facing out. That's what you want to see right there, because you want the right side of the pouch and the right side of the lining together. You can see in there how you kind of get a peek at the outside of the bag before you clip it there and kind of see where the casing is. And again, you're going to want to be sure as you're sewing this to make sure that that casing is still lined up nicely, that your seams were correct, because that hardware doesn't bend, it's metal. So you've got to make sure that the fabric is creating a nice home for it to go in easily. And now just sewing all of those layers together. So going from the edge all the way around on both sides. And in the template, the paper template that you get in the kit, it will tell you where to mark so that you know where to start and stop the sewing. So definitely also pay attention to those. All right, this is always the most exciting and most nerve-wracking part of completing a bag, is the turning inside out. I'm always scared to see if something didn't get, sewn right, or I don't know. It's just always a little bit both exciting and scary. So I'm turning it inside out here, and the last kind of sewing step here before I put the hardware in is to sew that lining closed there at the bottom. So I had to change the thread in my machine to purple so that it wasn't too visible. I know a lot of people hand sew it. I don't have the patience for that. So I always just machine sew it. Okay, and so now here is the tough thing. So I'm going to give you a tip. And I don't know if it says this in the directions, but like I said, I didn't read the directions. So there's 2 screws on both sides. There's a small one and a big one. First, you take the small one out, and that turns, and it's got a little grip on it, so you can turn it with your finger. The other one pulls out. It doesn't turn out. I used pliers, and I just pulled it straight out. So I spent a lot of time turning it, and that was not necessary. And then here, as you're feeding the hardware through that casing, just to make sure that it's going the direction that it needs to go. I had to take both of mine out, I think twice, because I didn't take the time. Can you tell that I am not a type A personality? I didn't make sure that they were oriented correctly for actually going back together. So my suggestion is, when you very first open the kit, take a look at how they're oriented, take a picture, just like really remember. And then that way it'll be easier when it comes to this part and you've taken them apart and you've got to figure out how to get them back together.
All right, we've got a finished project, not without its hiccups for sure. But the metal frame sort of snaps open like this. I'm going to put some pens in just to see if it helps it kind of stay up right here. I think it's more functional when it's full. And you can see that it just kind of sits cutely like that. Then if she wants to do some journaling, she can use it as she's on the go. And then it's ready to travel with her. And I think it's really cute that I added this little "Your Friend Made This" thing at the top, and this little scissor tag that she got also I think goes really cute with that fabric. I just really don't think that this fabric ended up making sense with this, so I think I'm gonna make her something else with this fabric, but I think that this one is simple, better just with the simple purple lining and then the cute little purple interior here. So I hope that she likes it. All right, now on to Annie's bag. Okay, editing Laura here to tell you that I don't actually end up showing you how I make the bag in the tutorial that you're about to see. What I am gonna do is talk about how I figured out how to make the ruffle. I had never made a ruffle before, so I think it's kind of helpful to watch a beginner figure it out. But there are so many good tutorials on YouTube, far better than anything that I would make, about how to make a tote bag. So really all you're gonna see here is how to make the ruffle and then how to insert it into the tote bag in a way that it will line up around the edge. Okay, so I've never made ruffles before, but based on my research, I think that I'm doing this right. We're gonna see. So what I did was I took the khaki fabric and I cut it into 96 inches long, which means that I had to piece a couple together. So this is 3 different strips sewn together. So it's 96 inches long and it's 4 inches wide this way. And then I've ironed it here in half. So this is 2 inches. Yes, 2 inches this way. And what I'm gonna do is do a basting stitch along here and along here. So 2 basting stitches. And then my understanding is if I pull the bobbin thread like this, it'll cinch up into a ruffle. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so you can see now that I've done 2 lines of the longest stitch length. I'm gonna grab the one that was the bobbin thread. So the bottom, which is these 2 threads, and I'm pulling. Oh, it's working. So I'm just pulling. Oh.
So you just kind of shimmy it slowly as you pull, and what I find is that it takes some patience, but over time, if you're patient enough, it will easily ruffle. So then I really let the final length of the ruffles determine the size of the bag.
Okay, so my next step is I'm gonna baste these ruffles onto the bag, and I'm gonna use pins because clips wouldn't work.
And so I was really careful to build consistency about how far the ruffles were from the edge to make sure that it's as straight as possible. And then I went really slowly as I sewed here because I wanted to make sure as I was basting it that, again, it was straight because I couldn't see the edges. So usually when I'm sewing things, I can see both edges, but for this, I couldn't.
All right, I've successfully basted the ruffle onto the bag.
And now is the moment that I'm finishing the bag where I'm going to put right sides together. And so the important thing to remember here is to tuck the ruffles in because they're going to peek out. So you don't want to see the ruffles. And I actually went through and pinned the entire bag before I realized my ruffles were poking out. So I just carefully tucked them under, making sure that they were all the way tucked so that I didn't accidentally sew the edge of the ruffle into the seam. And so I had to make sure to sew with a thick enough seam allowance to cover the seam of the ruffle itself, which did shrink the bag a lot. Like it ended up being smaller than I thought that it would be because I actually turned it inside out twice before I was able to sew and cover every single ruffle seam.
All right, here's the finished project. So we've got Annie's bag here. I love how this turned out. I think it looks so good. I kind of feel like I need to make myself one because I do have leftover fabric. Also, I can make her some other things. I'm trying to think, I think we got a ½ yard of each. I knew that I wanted extra in case I messed up. And I also wanted to be able to pick the exact section of the plaid that I wanted. So I just love how this turned out. It feels really sturdy. I think the ruffles are super cute. And obviously the liner is adorable. And I think the strap's really good. So I feel really good about this. I hope that Annie likes it. Here's a side-by-side of the inspiration and the bag that resulted. Here's Anna's finished project. It's just so cute. It's fun how it sits up so nicely and opens with such sturdiness. You can really fill this with a lot of different stuff. I think pens, stationery, journals, I mean, makeup, anything could go in here. It's just adorable. So I feel like I built 2 new skills making these 2 projects. So even though these are for my friends, I feel like I really gained a lot from what I learned. And now I can move forward feeling more comfortable with inserting hardware and adding ruffles to things. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.